All right, for today's lesson, exponent properties, students will simplify expressions with exponents by following the exponent properties with the use of their guided notes. The student can determine if they are correct by using the self-check slides on the guided notes. So students are to write the simplified expression. Students will write on the sketch pad of the Desmos activity if they need to visualize the moves that they need to follow the exponent properties. So on slide number 3 are the two exponent properties that we're talking about today, which is the zero exponent property and the negative exponent property. So the zero exponent property says any number with an exponent of 0 will become a 1, because what exponents mean is the base repeats. So if this was 5 to the 1, it repeats 1 time. If it's 5 squared, it means it repeats 2 times. So if you don't have the 5 repeating, it's just 1. Now, sometimes it becomes a negative 1 if there are no parentheses included. So like negative 5 to the 0. That means that 5 to the 0 is 1, but this negative needs to be dropped down. Or if we have a negative on the outside of the parentheses, once again, 5 to the 0 is 1, and then the negative sign gets dropped down. So that's really the only two cases where you would get a negative 1 if the exponent of 0 is involved. So we're going to move to slide number 4. And slide number 4 is a bunch of practice for you. Remember, if it does not yield a correct answer, please go back and fix it until it does. So what is the simplified power or a simplified answer of a to the power of 0? Even if it's a variable for the base, anything to the 0 power is 1. And you can self-check. If you write the answer of 1, it's going to say good work. Notice, so the answer is just 1. Now, what is the simplified answer of 3 to the 0? Any number to the 0 power is 1. Seven to the 0, same idea. It's 1. So number 4 is where you get that negative sign. The negative sign is located on the outside of the parenthesis. So what is really raised to the 0 power is that 4. 4 to the 0 is 1. We're going to drop down that negative 1. So then we're going to get negative 1. Now number 5 is different because the negative sign is included inside the parenthesis. So that negative sign is included. So this whole thing is grouped together. That whole number is grouped with a 0. So that is why you get a positive 1, because the negative is inside the parenthesis. Now, slide number 5 gives you a couple tips to do the caret key. Let's say our answer was a to the negative 2, or that can't be our answer because it's negative, but we would hit a caret key negative 2, or b to the third would be b caret 3. Now that caret key is from you hitting Shift 6. If you want a fraction first, you want to hit the dash button. It's right next to, or the slash rather, it's right next to the Shift key. Also, please don't write the 1 if you don't need it. So let's say your answer is 1a. For this to mark you correct, the answer just needs to be a. And then if you have more than one variable, please put it in ABC order. So the negative exponent property tells us that we can't have negative exponents. So if the negative exponent is in the numerator, we have to move it to the denominator. And if the negative exponent starts out in the denominator, we need to move it to the numerator. So we have a to the negative n. So this a has an exponent that's negative. Technically, it's in the numerator, and we need to move it to the denominator. So when we move something to the denominator that had a negative exponent, it actually becomes a positive exponent. That's the whole point of moving it. Now notice that there's nothing on top. There's nothing left on the numerator. So we have to fill that with a 1, okay? So if there's nothing left, you just put it underneath 1. So I'm going to write my division bar first, 1, and then a caret, and then n. Notice the green check mark appears, so we're good to go. We're going to do the same thing for a to the negative 2. We're going to circle it because it's negative exponent. Since it was in the numerator, I'm going to put it in the denominator. It's going to become a positive exponent, and I'm going to put 1 on top, so we have something there. So I'm going to hit my division bar, 1, down arrow, a, shift 6, and then a 2. Now you're going to do the same thing for number 3. So 2 to the negative 3 is also in the numerator. So we're going to circle and move it. Put a 1 on top. And we did it correctly. Now for number 4, this is where things get a little interesting. You want to make sure that you know where the items are. So the item that has a negative exponent is in the denominator. So I'm going to have to circle it and move it to the top. Now notice the 1, it has a positive exponent. That it's really a 1 of an exponent. So it becomes 1a to the nth power, to the n power. Now for this program to mark it right, you do not need to write that 1. So it should just be a to the n power. Now for number 5, we have 1 divided by x to the negative 3, y squared. And the y squared's in the denominator. So the only thing that has a negative exponent is that x to the negative 3. I'm going to move it up top, make it a positive exponent. Y squared stays. Please don't write that 1. We don't need to write that 1. It's just x to the 3rd power over y squared. So make your fraction. Make sure you move your cursor all the way down to the bottom so you can put y squared in the denominator. Number 6 is also the same. So we're going to have 24 over r to the 3rd power, and then s to the negative 4. The only term that has a negative exponent is the s. So we have to move locations. So the 24 stays, then s to the 4th over r to the 3rd. So 24s, the 4th power, go all the way down to the denominator and write r to the 3rd power. Now what exponent property did you use? We used the negative exponent property. Negative exponent property says we're not allowed to have negative exponents, so we have to circle and move them. If they were in the numerator, we move them to the denominator and vice versa. Everything that has a positive exponent stays exactly in its location. So that's why we did not move the 24, and that is why we did not move the r to the third, because it was located in the denominator. Now slide number 6. We have x to the negative 5. That's the only term that has a negative exponent. So it was in the numerator, so now I'm moving it to the denominator. And then we have a 1 on top. Number 2, we want to be careful that 4 really has an exponent of 1, that a really has an exponent of 1. We don't write them because we don't need to yet, but that y to the negative 3 has an exponent that's negative. So if you notice, 4a stays on top, and then y to the third goes into the denominator. Number 3, the 10 has a positive 1 as an exponent. We have m to the negative 7. That's in the denominator. We need to move it to the numerator. So the 10 stays put, and then m to the 7th. Same with number 4. We have 5a. That does not have a negative exponent. b to the negative 9 does. So we need to circle it and move it. Now we're going to keep 5a on top, and then b, and then make the 9 a positive. Please remember to do this in alphabetical order. The coefficient, the 5, stays in front, and then you're good to go. Now, number 5 talks about both properties that we've learned. So 6 to the 0 means something. 6 to the 0 becomes a 1, because that was what we did on slide number 4. So I'm just going to cross this out, and I'm going to put a 1, because anything to the 0 power is a 1. And then I still have a negative exponent attached to the y, so I have to move that up. So then I have a y next to 1 that's squared all over x to the 4th. Now, for it to be marked correct in this table, we do not need to write that 1 because we have the term y squared on top. So if you notice, I typed it wrong. You just want to be mindful. Hit the division key first. That's going to be helpful for you. So then we have y squared in the numerator, and then x to the 4th in the denominator. And then lastly, number 6. So we have x to the negative 2 in the numerator. We have 3 to the 0 power in the denominator, and then we have y to the 4th. So we know 3 to the 0 is 1, so I'm not even going to bother writing it right now. And then I have this x to the negative 2, which needs to be moved to the bottom. Now, when everything moves to the bottom, we have to put a 1 on top. And then remember alphabetical order, x squared, and then y to the 4th because it stayed. So then we have 1 divided by x squared, y to the 4th.